Are we streaming? Did we start? Oh, okay. We're up and live? Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Still a few people coming in, but I wanted to thank you for being here. If you're not familiar, if you've never been before, this is something I started doing 8 or 9 years ago, I think. Partly it was as we were doing governance change because now the voters meeting is really dedicated to the board of directors work, and I wanted to be able to have conversations with you about just as pastor where I thought God was leading us and evaluating the past and looking to the future kind of thing. And so we've been doing that. We didn't think about it till maybe last week that we will all be eating an hour earlier. So I hope tacos for breakfast is okay for you guys. You weren't too put off by that. If you would do me a favor, the staff all just volunteered and so you thank them for doing that. Appreciate it. I should say staff and my wife, because Julie made mine while I was on an airplane yesterday, so I didn't actually even make my stuff. So let's start off with a word of prayer. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for all of your gifts. We thank you for our Sabbath day of rest and worship. Thank you for the way that you continue to enliven us by your Spirit. We ask that you would guide and direct us as we wrestle with where it is that you would have us go. We pray, Lord, that you would continually always lead us to be asking that question, but also open our eyes to see, who it is that you want us to serve, the places in our community you want us to break in. But of course, not just in our community, but also throughout the nation and the world. We thank you for your faithfulness to us in the past, and we know that it will be here in the future. We look forward to you unveiling it for us. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. So our town hall today, before I kind of give you our agenda, I want to, a couple different times today. So this isn't actually a town hall. We tricked you all into coming here so we could get you to start using the app. No, I'm going to refer a few times today to where you can find information because people are always asking for different things. And so I do want to tell you that just to point that out, we're going to do a couple instructionals in the midst of this, just so people are getting more familiar with it, giving statements and stuff. But some people are getting this message still. So when they open their app and they hit the directory, they get a message that says, you don't have access. That means at some point you declined the invitation, whether you knew or not, or you let it go too long. So you just need to let Sarah or Kelly know in the office that you need another invite, and they will get you connected. The other thing that can happen is sometimes people will say to us, hey, I tried to find so-and-so's information in the directory, and they're not in there. And that's because they accepted joining the app or our database, but they restricted and said no one can see it. And we're guessing that you would accidentally do that and not do that on purpose. So if you check yours, this is how you can kind of see in the app when you look at yourself if you're going to share your information and what it looks like when you've gone through the process, right? So you're going to select your profile, you're going to share it, and then it shows you in the directory, right? So we still have that kind of happen, every once in a while where someone's like, why isn't Miriam Pretzer a member of our church? And we say, no, she is. What? Yeah.
Okay. When you do that, everyone's asked for addresses. Planning Center does not allow this directory on your phone to share addresses. So if you can't, you'll have to either call or text the person or email the person if they've shared that. If not, you'll have to ask the office. So that's one thing you'll never be able to share on this directory. You can only share the things that are listed up there. Just FYI.
So you have to text them and ask them for their address. All right. So here's kind of what we're going to cover a little bit, and this is kind of familiar. If you've been to any of these, we're going to talk a little bit about the state of Christianity. We're going to talk about Summit of Peace in 2003. We're going to talk about what is becoming the new normal since COVID, at least that's the way I'm classifying it. And then we're going to talk about looking forward. So, if you've been here the past year since COVID, I had slide about this, and I just feel like it's redundant. We all know now. So this is just the same slide I gave you in my sermon today. This is from a study that was done by, I think, Arizona University recently. If you look at Barna, if you look at other studies, they can have different numbers, but the trends are all, relatively the same, right? Attendance is down since COVID. identifying as a Christian is down. Those who identify as none is risen. In other words, they do not consider themselves religious or to be part of a religion. No, I shouldn't say, yeah. They may consider themselves to be religious, but they're not part of a religion. And then charitable giving, of course, as I've shown, is at a 30-year low. So, as always, we kind of kick off and I just kind of talk about Summit of Peace and where we are, kind of ever since our founding. And so this is our baptized membership. I'm going to give you raw numbers here in a second. This is our confirmed membership, and this is our attendance. And so I'm going to unpack and talk about these a little bit more here in a second. I'm going to start with this one. So here's our membership. Baptized is now at 566, confirmed is at 403. And you'll see the trends over the last few years. Back in 18, we added 25, 13, and 19. We added 27 and 42 during COVID, which is wonderful. And then minus 31, minus 37. So last year I told you this, and we did it again this year. We had lots of people, not lots, we had many people who moved away. And then once we started live streaming, they're like, we just want to stay a member. And we're like, well, that's okay in the short term, but it's not okay in the long term. So this year, we continue to kind of, if we have not seen you since COVID, if we had not seen you since COVID, you got a contact from us asking, why, what do you want us to do, that sort of thing. So we actually had 28 members join us this past year, but our losses were, we had one death, you may remember. We transferred 15 different households to other LCMS churches, along with four children from those. We had 17 move with no transfer. And so what that means is if we didn't hear from you, you never said where you wanted to transfer. We tried for X number of months and years, then you end up dropped. And then we had another 14 that were, and maybe one of you were like, hey, your 35-year-old daughter is still listed on our rolls. She lives in Texas. Do you want us to still have her on? And so we removed 14 people that way. So that's technically a net. We are minus 37. In case you're curious, we did have 5 households that I know specifically transferred because of the switch to one service. So, that's what that is. As a pastor making a huge change, that is way smaller than I had in my nightmares, and so I was happy about it, but of course you're never happy to see anybody go. Any questions kind of about just what those numbers are? Just as a reminder, we are live streaming, so if you have a question, wait for the microphone runner to come and bring it to you, or if you're really impatient, I'll repeat the question. Here's our attendance. So one of the things I'm going to tell you is we included live stream once we started doing that in our attendance, but we're not doing that anymore for a couple reasons. One, the Synod doesn't want you to, and if you know me, I don't really care what the Synod wants or doesn't want, but Facebook stopped reporting it some time ago. I don't remember exactly. And then, on our platform, we can see it. But we just kind of, as a staff, reached a point where we're like, we know that it's out there. It's helpful for people, but we need to think about that as a little bit differently. So this is our actual in-person worship over the last 5 years, right? So 315 and 218, 284 right before COVID. We had 112 and 139 during that, 165 last year, and we averaged 159 this year in person. Any questions about that? Okay. Oh. Yeah, I have a slide coming up. It's pretty jarring. So just hold. I'll show it to you here in a minute. But you're right. Yeah, it's a real thing. Yeah. So in terms of where we are in our present ministry, going to cover financial staffing and what we think looks like going forward. So you have your infograph in front of you about some of these things, but just to kind of remind you, this is our general fund giving, 589 basically thousand given in these different areas. Just a reminder, Grow in Faith is mostly what we think about in terms of things that happen here, largely Sunday morning worship, large group stuff. Share the Faith is small group ministries and the things they do, and Live the Faith is our caring of the community, one another as well. So like our member helping fund would be in that as well, and our care ministries, that sort of thing. So as we think about our budget in terms of income, that's where it goes. This is our restricted fund giving for the year. It was right over $70,000, broken up largely in outreach, because that's kind of what we like to use restricted fund giving for. So that gives us this total. So general fund giving was 588, restricted fund. So total giving there was 659,196. Now I've been showing this slide too for a few years, and I actually realized that I haven't really been doing it right, specifically since COVID. So this is income. So that includes, for example, COVID money, and it includes the money we make off of camps. So, I mean, that's fine to understand, but I think really what's more helpful is to understand our giving, what was actually our giving, right? So our giving this year was $2,000 over what I had budgeted. Man, am I good or what? Except for the next part, which was our spending was 115%. Now this is largely, things keep breaking, and we keep having to replace them. In fact, if you were at the Encore event they had on Wednesday, you got to be subject to the boiler breaking for the 5th time in a calendar year, something like that. So our building is aging. We're dealing with that. We actually increased the maintenance budget by about 40% for the budget for this next year, because this just sort of keeps happening. But our giving was at 588,963, so that's 11,000 a month. That is actually down from last year a little bit. And so in the future, I'm going to try to differentiate those things. I realize that it's not, income and giving is just not the same thing. Does that make sense? So from here on out, I'm going to kind of try to break those out. Now, as always, I get questions that are where can we see the financials? And with our new Church Center app, it's in a different place, so I want to show you where that is. So if you go to summitofpeacechurchcenter.com, this is the landing page. If you go up to more and click on Did You Know, it'll take you. And if you scroll down, you'll see our document library. And if you click on that, it'll take you here. And so, for example, you see our the end of the year financials, and so you can look at it there. You can also, it gives you an option to download if you have Dropbox too. So that's where you find that. If you want to look at it on the app, in the app, you go to more, you go to Did You Know, and same thing, you go down to the document library and you can find it on your app. So that gives you a picture of that tells you how to find that information. So I brought this up a few years ago when we were facing, we kept having water issues in the basement that we had to mitigate, but our building is getting old, and it's taking more and more to upkeep every year. So I have an idea that I'm going to explore, and I want you to hear me say that very clearly so that no one freaks out. I have an idea to explore, but I want to tell you why first. So even before I was senior pastor, Pastor Allshouse was still here, we still had a council, we always had a dream of building an emergency fund. And we've tried with varying degrees of success to do that and have not ever really done it, right? We tend to operate with what God gives us, and we haven't really, collected more. And I haven't been able to do it even under the new structure. Obviously, in an organization like ours, one of the easiest ways, 90% of our budget is, guess what? Salaries and staff, yeah. So our decisions are hard when we're looking at significant amounts of money. So I had an idea. So ever since I've been senior pastor, once a month or so, I get asked about our land. And if I would be willing to sell our land. Charles Schwab wants it. Christian Brothers actually wanted it. All the people who wanted it, I didn't want as neighbors, so I said no. But my wife, as you know, she works in economic development for the city. As I told her one time, I was like, because you could never get land back, so I was never really interested in getting rid of it. But I also, if you know me, I am not a bigger barns guy. I even said before COVID, if we ever did something, I'd plant a church before I'd build a bigger building or expand our campus or anything like that, or at least without a different ministry plan. So, knowing that I probably wasn't ever going to do something huge with all of it, Julie said, well, why don't you do a land lease? So if you're not familiar, you can do a land lease with property, and a tenant comes in, puts on whatever they want. They lease back to you for a typical one. So Julie has a commercial real estate friend that is working with us now, and as she explained this to me, who knew nothing, you find a tenant, they do whatever they want, improvements to it so that they can make use of it the way they want, and then they give, they pay you back for it. A typical land use lease for something like that we would accept here would be something like it'd be a 10-year with 2 options at 5 years, right? So it'd be something like a 20-year that you would do something on the property. Her estimation for the kind of things that would go in there, she thought we could expect about $180,000 a year in income. On the other hand, if we decide to sell it, it's right now about $2.1 million. Somewhere in the near future, there's going to be a sign on here that says available. And I wanted to warn all of you first so that my phone didn't blow up with all of you asking me, why is there a sign that says available on the land? But we're going to start pursuing this over the next year. Now, we're not in any hurry, we're not in any rush, but I am kind of thinking about this as maybe this is the way that we should address this. Now, the land has a special kind of unique zoning. And so right now it has to be residential. It's called special residential, and we already met with planners from the city, and they wouldn't actually let us put houses there because the driveways can't come onto that street. That Cherry Street, it's too close to 136. But things that would pass right now without a rezoning change would be senior living, daycare, some things like that. I actually reached out to Food for Hope because they're looking to have a new facility, and they would qualify for that, but I don't think they're ready to spend quite that much money. So anyway, I'm thinking about doing something with the land. Now, I do want to tell you, you may have heard me talk about this before, so starting where our community gardens are and down, I have wanted, the only kind of dreams I ever had for the land was to put in extra parking and a covered portico with places to drop people off, but particularly so that our mobility challenged people don't have to navigate this nonsense and they can come straight in the building, right? So that is something that I still would like to do. So at the moment, if I got to do whatever I wanted, I would split that so we'd still have a little land to do that, and we would let someone buy or lease 1.5 to 1.75 acres, something like that. So again, as the rumor mill goes piling through the church, someone says, did you hear pastor's selling the land? That is not the case yet. We're experimenting, or we're researching it, and there's 2 things you should know. Despite our structure change, that would require a voter approval. So we'd never go, once we came up with the dream, the voters would have to approve it. Now, one of the things I think is kind of unique is we also know that the neighbors are going to have to approve it as well. And so I feel pretty confident that anything you would tolerate, they would tolerate. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to put in well, yeah, potch. I don't know, is anything, whatever. But yeah, Gary. Well, so in all seriousness, the biggest desire that we get from that now is something like that because of the high school. But I don't think the neighbors would tolerate anything with a drive-through and that's just so 7 Brews already made me an offer. I don't know if you're familiar with them, or reached out with an offer. They're trying to get into the market. I don't know where they're from, but they're like Dutch Brothers. Yeah. So I just want to kind of give you that. And so this is my current plan, because I do think whether it's lease or sell, that would give us some assets, pay off the building. We'd have money to fix it up. And then to spoil your day, then I'd start an endowment. So no one changed their giving. You don't need to think about that, right? So that's kind of my idea that we're researching. Any questions or worries, or I guess about that? Yeah.
So how much land is that?
It's 2.01 acres. Yeah.
And does the city of Thornton have anything to say about it?
Mhm.
Or is it neighbors?
Yep. So depending on if it takes rezone, so even if we brought something in that didn't take rezoning, they would have a community meeting and let neighbors yell about it. Julie attends many of those. Now, depending on their yelling, it determines what the city council decides. But if it actually falls within the zoning, doesn't take any exemptions, whatever, then we can move it with just the city planner's okay, if that makes sense. Yeah. Well, yeah, so we think things like a daycare, a dentist, something where they're closed nights and weekends, right? Churches in our situation have done something like this, usually do an agreement that says, on the weekends we have overflow parking here, some things like that. So that, my sense at the moment would be that's where we would go, somewhere in that direction where it would be not a fast food place, not a tire store, none of those. The senior living really is, I'm curious about that, but that's kind of where we're at, yeah. Yes? I'm doing a terrible job of, I'm sorry. Go ahead, you ask your question and I'm going to repeat it.
So the company that would lease it, would they be responsible for the updates? We would just be leasing land.
Correct, yeah. And then down the road, if we really decided, he asked the question, if we leased it to somebody and they built something there, they're in charge of its maintenance and upkeep and updating. That was your question, right?
Whatever it would take to be able to move on to the property.
Oh, yeah. So yes, that is also our intention, is we want an agreement that passes on any cost of zoning, change water, would be taken by the tenant. Yeah. So we're looking at trying to do a zero cost for us deal. Yeah.
So did I interpret
You're slow.
correctly? The primary reason for doing this is to ease the cash flow. That's not primary, but the only reason.
Well, no. So to be honest, I held on to it because, again, you can never get land back. But COVID has made me realize anything that I even dreamed that day is I just don't. It's an asset we have that I think we need to make use of going forward. And yeah, it's to help, particularly with what is an aging building and sites cost. Yeah. Now I'd love to do, so we're going to talk at the end about how we're doing a strategic growth process. And one of the things I'm excited about is that we'll finish that before we make a decision. So I'm actually excited to have that tie into, right, or lead into and help us discover. So we may end up saying we actually want to partner with a ministry that does who knows what, daycare, senior living, something like that. But that's the initial reason, yeah. Yep. Not loud enough to be heard on the live stream. That's all right.
I mean, if you lease property for the 20 years or whatever, and then whoever had it bellies up and you got a building there, then what happens?
Yeah, so you could sell it. The commercial real estate person we met with is that they actually, because I asked the same question, she said, no, that's actually usually a good thing, because then you have a triple net income opportunity, because you can sell. So we could decide to sell it with a tenant and stuff on there, right? Which makes it more attractive for another person if they own it. But yeah, so you're talking about if we got to where lease is up and nobody wants it anymore, then yeah, what's on there is our responsibility. Yeah.
Are there any tax implications if
Yeah, so what will happen is we will have to, that property and its income will become taxable. Yeah. Because we're using part of it as a nonprofit. And just to be honest, so you all know, that may be what forces us to a sale rather than a land lease. That may be the one main thing that does it. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Now I'm nervous.
Okay. As being a member of a number of years.
Including when we got the land?
Yes.
Yep.
The original intent to use that property was to save it in case the congregation wanted to open a school or a daycare. But also your idea of a portico and a drive-up area for seniors was also part of the plan.
Oh, okay.
On this western door. So.
Yeah. So like I said, we're in an exploratory time. And again, the timing for me is really good because I want our strategic growth process to inform what we decide about that, right? So that may be that we get done and go, demographics and the gifts of congregation and everything say we need a daycare, and maybe it's time finally to, I don't know, but that's why that's why these timings are aligning. Yeah. Any others?
Is there any chance that there could be an investment within our congregation to want to build our own daycare that would be a Lutheran daycare or a Lutheran grade
yeah.
school?
So there is a number of, I don't know, what would we call them, RSOs that help Open Arms, isn't that, or what's?
Well, if you want to go soaring or open sky,
Oh,
it'd probably be the.
Yeah. So there's a couple different groups that help you do that. And so, yeah, I'm not expecting it, but I would not be surprised if that wouldn't be something where we end up after wrestling with this saying, well, if we believe that that's what a daycare there is valuable, a senior center there is valuable, what's our capacity then to have it still be, yeah. I think that's certainly possible, yes.
How old is the current building?
Well, it was built in stages. The last one was finished in 2003. Well, I guess I should go in the other order. The first one was finished in 90. This part was 90, added on in 97? Or 2001. It was 2001, and then these in 2003? The annexes? Okay, so the part that causes us all the trouble is 2001. Yeah. Any other questions about that?
So if we get a senior center, do we all get a discount?
Well, so you say that, but I don't know, this is much more common in the Midwest where you would have Lutheran retirement places, and much like a high school association, if your church was part of it, you got first dibs and maybe a discount going in. And I would not, you say that jokingly, but if we decided to do some kind of senior center or partner with one, I would ask that question. Yeah, I would ask, can we at least do something where if we have people that get first choice, or I don't know, but I have no idea how that would play out. But I don't think it's ridiculous to ask. Yeah. Some of you are like, let's get that going right away now. Yeah.
All right, so then once the land is either purchased and or the 20-year lease is up, then that's it. That's all the funds you're going to get from that land. So there is kind of a shelf life or a maximum amount that you can get from this, and then once that's
gone. Yeah. Well, so that's why if we, the congregation would decide actually this as well, because if we just start an endowment, the congregation board has to write that its conditions, and it has to be approved. But anyway. If we sold it, I would recommend we do something like pay off the building, do emergency fund, the rest is an endowment. And then, but if we go a land lease, still do something similar. So the idea wouldn't be to just, bank it. We want to see it, do something with it other than that, yeah, if that makes sense. Wow, a lot of questions about this. I had no idea. Any others? Yep. Is our current building sufficient for growth? Well, yeah, I mean, when we had, 300 in worship and 45 kids in Sunday school and 60 in high school, and we're a long ways from there now. So I think so. And again, I as long as I'm your senior pastor, my heart is always towards starting new, not. So I would, even if we outgrew this, I wouldn't advise or back an idea that would, let's just build bigger here. My heart is always just believes in starting more new, or in today's market, restarting maybe another church that's struggling or something. So I can't wait for the day that we struggle with that again and say, yeah. Any others? Okay. I mean, I expected there to be a lot in that area, but I don't know if I thought there would be that many. All right, so let's talk about our new normal at the moment. Our ministry size, Sunday morning demographics. I shared this with you last year. This is updated a little bit. It took 31 volunteers prior to COVID. It takes 33 because of the added live stream. And the pool is 50% of what it was pre-COVID, and so we talked about this at the town hall. But look, the green one was after we did the service in the fall about having the one worship service. I pleaded with you to volunteer, and most of the areas have gone up again. So I do thank you for that, all of you who've re-engaged and stepped up in volunteering. The green, so the blue is pre-COVID, the orange is after, and green is since August. So David and I would just like to say, if anyone's interested in doing a children's message, that yeah, just, I mean, we love the kids, but if anybody else, yeah. So I do thank you for your response to that. Here's another little piece of information. If you volunteer somewhere, the app reminds you, and you also get a call, but you can avoid getting those by just accepting as soon as you're assigned. Actually, it still sends you a reminder, doesn't it? Yeah. So, but you can accept, and then we know how many ushers we are going to actually have on Sunday versus how many are assigned, all that kind of thing. So if you do that, that helps us as well. And so this is what I referred to, Ray, when you asked a little while ago. So our worship attendance in 2023 was the same as it was in 1993. Our in-person worship is the same as it was in 1993. Our membership is where it was right before COVID. So, I don't remember if you have anything particularly in yours, but I mean, this is the trend. I saw this even before COVID, and I may have said in various meetings, right? A church used to operate with the idea that its most faithful people, quote unquote, were there 3 out of 4 Sundays all the time. That fell to about 50% since I've been a senior pastor, and now it's, well, you saw what it's about one. You're faithful at 1 a month, which I don't know where else in the world you could get away with that, but that's just the way it is. Yeah. So, questions or responses to that? I want to kind of remind you of our demographics. I did this last year, so I'm going to go quickly. Birth rates have been in decline since 2007, although they went up for a couple of years. Do you know what that's called? That's called COVID babies. And so it's been in decline. This is only through 2020. It's actually gone up for the first time in the last 2 years a little bit. And so what that meant was that one of the things we were struggling with, I talked about this last year, is that for 7 years or so, we averaged 40 plus in our Wednesday night programs. Last year we had 22. This year it's 18. Next year it's going to be, what did we come up with? 10 or 11, something like that. So we just have this dip that is a reality. So we have to be flexible. It changes how we do things, approach things, that sort of thing. But it makes us also wrestle with, as I mentioned, asking the question, what does God want us doing? We knew what he had us doing beforehand, and now we're going to see where he wants us here in the future. Looking forward, discipleship, just to remind you of our marks of discipleship, growing in faith, sharing the living faith. You see these posters everywhere. But these are the areas that we focus on, and it's even our process. This is changing, but for the most part, people connect with us first on Sunday morning. Sometimes now we have them connect with us through our life groups, and sometimes through our service projects. But for the most part, at some point, they join worship, they connect with us relationally and share, and then they use their gifts to serve as a Summit of Peace or for Summit of Peace or with Summit of Peace. So of all the numbers that worry me the most, this is actually the number one, is our small group participation. Now, we didn't do them last summer because the leaders asked for a break. Now, it's been my fault since COVID that I didn't raise up new leaders, to give them a break. So training more facilitators is on the list for next year. Raising up new ones, that's on me for not doing that. But our groups really needed a break. That's why we did it. But we used to average just 120 in the fall. Just in the fall, we would usually get at least 10 groups that were completely full, and we had 180 this year. So I am looking out here and realizing that I am largely preaching to the choir. But this is the most concerning, I guess, as the pastor of the church, because I just think that is so vital in not just for your relationships, but in your spiritual maturity, right? Other Christians help us grow and challenge us and aid us. And so we got to live life together to do that. So, Sarah, when's the next life group sign up? Is that going on even today?
Today.
Oh,
yes.
wow, look at that. Sign up for a life group if you haven't done so already. Here's how we did our outreach this year. Fifth Sunday donations, a little over $7,000, almost $8,000, or Angel Tree gifts. This is all on your infograph, but just a reminder of kind of how we try to focus our work in the community, our neighborhood, our city, the world, and so all those that are connected with that. Staffing, this is current staff in 2024. To remind you, Sarah's the director of operations. Kelly's our staff administrator. Mark volunteers his time helping with preaching and some visitation. But somehow he's worked it out that every time I need him, he's on vacation. So I don't know how he did that. No, I'm kidding. Katie's our director of worship and is our director of choirs. Tori's our financial manager. And my dad's back as our facilities manager. He's also a volunteer. So you'll notice we're down a couple for staff from a few not too long ago, pastor, DCE. So we're kind of wrestling with that. If you were at the fall town hall, I also told you I'm not doing anything about it for a couple reasons. One, our strategic growth process, but two, I think the next person we need to bring on staff should be my replacement, the guy that we want, if God's willing, would be the one who would, we'd raise up and train and get ready to replace me. We got the alert team up and going, which we had talked about last year. And so if you're interested, we have that team. You can volunteer for it. We're going to be bringing in fire department to do CPR and some other training and things with them. This is just a reality that we have in our world today, unfortunately. And so you've probably seen how we always have someone walking around with a walkie-talkie in the parking lot and the building during worship. And so that's what that's about. Okay, here we go. How do you get your giving statement for the year? This is an infomercial in the middle of the Summit of Summit. So you remember we switched our church database in the middle of the year, not middle of the year, of April. So the old statement from CCB, Kelly has them printed, and you can get them from her, or you can contact to have it mailed or emailed, or pick it up on Sunday morning. So if you need those, that's how you're going to get January through April, because CCB is no more. For the ones going forward, so from then on, you can do it on the Church Center and the church app, right? So is this the app? That's the website, right?
This is the email. We send out an
Oh,
email to
that's right.
everyone. So if you get it, this is what you see in your inbox, the blue box. You click on that, then you'll click download again, and it'll download to your. So I suggest doing it from your desktop, and then you'll just print it from your downloads.
So if you have accepted and been part of Church Center so far, you got an email for you to download it.
Yeah, this is just the Church Center portion. So you have to get your CCB January through, depending on when you donated in April, your April statement from Kelly's got envelopes in the back with everyone that you can pick up today. We can mail it to you, email it to you, just let us know. But this is just April 16th through December 31st.
So you'll need both.
Yes.
You can also go on your app and find them. So you go to your profile person. So you click on your picture. Oh, by the way, if you don't have a picture, you're mean. Put your picture in there. Go to your picture, scroll down, and you'll find your giving. You click on it, you go to statements, and you can get it on your app as well. So, any questions about that? All right, done with the infomercials. And we're actually done with my portion of the State of the Church. I'm going to bring up Bill Woolsey here to talk about our strategic growth process. But is there any questions for me from what we talked about? Any of the things we talked about?
Pastor, you said the next person you think needs to come on as your replacement. How many years of training is he going to have?
Well, I would, in a dream world, I'd steal some associate from someplace that had been there 3 or 4 years. And then he'd have some experience, but then he'd be with me for 10 or so, God willing. That'd be, but how many of our guys have succeeded in replacing themselves the way they thought they would? Very few, yeah. God has, as soon as we make a plan like that, God laughs. But that doesn't mean I don't think we should plan. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, yeah. No others? Okay, so I'm going to bring up Bill Woolsey. He is the founder and president of 5-2, an organization he's going to tell you some more about. He's going to be helping us with our strategic growth process over the years. So he's here to present to you a little bit of what that looks like, explain what it is, answer your questions. I do want to let you know he's going to mention something coming up called our steering committee. He'll tell you about the work they do, that sort of thing. But this is our actual team that we've put together. It's Jackie Jackson. She is from our board of directors. Newly, as of last week at their meeting, elected as the chair. So she's the chair of our board and on it. Chris Munson, Laura Niederrock, and then the senior pastor is always on it. And then since the senior pastor's on it, but they also need somebody who will do something instead of just listen, Sarah's on it. So
that's very, very true.
Yeah. So all yours are after this. It's just forward and back.
Forward back, so
Yep.
this,
The big one's forward,
the
yep.
big one in the back.
Yep, and I'll jump in. So welcome, Bill, if you would. And
Thanks, Jeremy. Jeremy and I have known each other since somewhere around 2009, 2011. Yeah, and Jeremy was actually served in our network back then. And so when he and I kind of reconnected here over the last, probably about the last 9 months, I guess, it's been a real joy to kind of check up and see where he and this ministry now are. So let me just introduce to you a little bit about myself and about how we got to where we are, and then also the process that we're working with you here at Summit of Peace. So first of all, I'm a Texan. Anybody been to Texas? You could raise your hand. That's God's country. You should be proud. Okay, no. So born and raised there, started at Texas A&M University, a lifelong Lutheran, grandparents, German, spoke German in the home, all that kind of stuff, so we wouldn't be able to understand them. Started at Texas A&M, and then I switched to Concordia, Austin, and that's where I got my undergrad. Went pre-seminary in St. Louis was where you went through St. Louis as well, didn't you? I don't know if this thing's going to work or not for me. Is that? Yeah, let's trade. Thanks.
Okay, pick up fine? Good, thank you. All right. I served congregations in the Midwest and started out in St. Louis, Youth and Evangelism, and then Central Illinois, Decatur, Illinois, was there about 7 years. Was evangelism, that's kind of my common theme going through my ministry, executive pastor. And then in 1997, my family, we were invited back to Texas, and we launched a church called Crosspoint Community Church in far west Houston. It was a right place, right time, fast-growing area. We launched with a preschool right out of the gate, sports ministry, 40 acres, and the goal was to create a ministry that reached especially whom we called Lawnmower Guy. And he would rather mow his lawn on Sunday morning than go to church. And so we designed the preschool to reach his wife. We designed the worship and everything else to reach him. Fast-growing congregation. Ultimately, when I left in 2015, it was 3 locations around Houston. And so we just learned a lot there. We learned a lot about how to reach people, especially in a growing consumer culture. And what does it mean? Kind of like what Pastor Jeremy said this morning, how do we engage people where they are rather than expecting them to change before we reach them with the gospel? And then in 2009, we started what is called 5-2 Network. And we launched this network initially to support church planters in our denomination. So again, I'm LCMS, and I brought about 12 guys into the room. And at that time, for those of you who might remember, our denomination had a goal to start 2,000 new ministries by 2017, the anniversary of the Reformation. And so we got these church planners together, and we said, how could we help? How could we help President Kieschnick and the Synod reach this goal? And we started this network, and we chose the name 5-2 from 5 loaves and 2 fish, the feeding of the 5,000. And we chose it because in Mark chapter 6, when Jesus is speaking, when it recounts his words, both times those verses, they're in the command. They're a Greek command. They're not an option. So when the disciples come to him and say, send the people away, they're hungry, he says, you give them something to eat. He commands them to take care of the situation in the community, you might say, to address it. And then they say, well, that's going to take, half a year's wages. That's ridiculous. And he says, command again, go and see how many loaves and fish there are. And it's that truth that we knew as church planters, and we've since seen over the last 14 years, is that the number one fear entrepreneurial type Christians have, or any entrepreneur, frankly, is where's the money going to come from and where are the people going to come from? That's common fear. And churches fall in that same pattern, that we feel that God wants us to do something, but we immediately go to, well, we don't have the money, or we don't have the people. So we launched it with that name to help people understand that God provides the resources, and they're 99.9% in the community around you. Matter of fact, the ministries that we've helped start, they don't have to have the people to do the work. Church I was with in Yuba City, California yesterday, working with, they're a church that worships about 60 people average. But during the week, on Wednesday nights and Friday mornings, they serve, now they just told me this, they are now serving 1,000 people a week through their food ministry. But they're serving them using volunteers from the community. So all it is that's missing most of the time that we see is leadership. Leadership is what's missing. You will find tons of people in your community who want to actually do what you want to do, but they're not sure they want to lead it. So we launched this, and since 2015 then, our goal is that people are introduced to Jesus through whatever we help start. And if possible, we measure the baptisms in those ministries so that we can celebrate that. So almost 250,000 people now since 2015 have been introduced to Jesus through 5-2-oriented ministries, churches, nonprofits, subsets of congregations. We have over 259 churches and nonprofits that we've worked with. 39 leaders have been trained to start 9 schools. We work with a group called Soaring Educational Services that, since the pandemic, is launching Christian micro schools Micro school is a school of 50 or less kids. Number one disrupted industry during the pandemic, the educational industry. And so huge study done on how parents are more open now than ever before to different forms of education because of what happened, what they were forced to go into. So last year alone, we worked with 244 leaders and over 70 churches. We're doing a lot of work right now in Ohio through the Ohio District in helping dying churches collaborate and partner with thriving churches so that we don't lose the geography and we can continue to have the gospel presented there. This is just a sample of some of the organizations and churches, schools, districts that we've worked with. Most of the work that we do is in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. We've now started over the last year expanding out into multiple other denominations, but by and large, that's our history. This is a Pastor Brad Hubbard, friend of both of ours here. When we created this process that we do, our goal was, we know how hard it is to create change within churches. And so we said, we want to really bring enough staff hours into the process so that the staff that is there doesn't have to do all of the heavy lifting and carry the load in that. And so when we work with a congregation, there's a catalyst person such as myself, but then we also have a customer success person that works who would be interfacing with Sarah, for instance, in the time that we spend with you to make sure that we're helping bring that energy that's creating whatever change is necessary. We also, as I mentioned before, this is Nick Price. Nick is a pastor at a LCMS church. He's a senior pastor. It's a multi-site church in Chicago. And we're working with one of the urban settings, urban campuses there in Galewood, helping restart it. It basically died during the pandemic. It went from 100 down to about 30 people. We're now back up to 70 in that location. But what's really been neat here at Trinity Church is to see how the work we're doing at one location has moved across, and they've now seen record baptisms in those locations. So we celebrate that, just have lots of wonderful stories that we see from that. You know this, Pastor Jeremy has shown you stats before, but the church in the U.S., every mainline denomination except for the Assemblies of God has been declining since 1960. And the pandemic didn't really do anything new. It just accelerated and it cemented what was already happening. But it accelerated it out the wazoo. Just crazy types of changes, sexuality, social understanding, politics, medical industry, your surgery, the transgender, and everything that we've seen happen just was already lying dormant and it took off. And now the church is kind of like, how do we respond to this and what do we do? Some of the world shifts. Oops, did I not? Okay, you know what? I'm going to go back. How do I go back here? Oh, the bottom one? I guess I didn't have, this one I probably didn't make all the slides for it. That was my problem. We've seen a lot of world shifts that have happened. One, we went from a Christian nation in the 50s. Now we're a Hindu nation. We're one nation under many gods. Tons of gods. It's really what we are. And so Christian church has to figure that one out. We've also gone from people knowing Christian truth to now we have entire generations that are discovering it for the first time. And so those of us who have been in Christianity for a long time, we encounter people and we're like, you don't know that already? You know? When we launched Crosspoint, I remember a guy who had been helping us for at least 6 months. He came up to me one Sunday morning and said, what's this Lord's Supper thing? Now I had never met an adult who had been part of the church who had no clue what the Lord's Supper was all about. And we're seeing that even more so now, that people are just discovering Jesus. But we also have moved to a point where instead of saying like, I'll pray for you, they'll say things like, I'll send up a good word to the universe for you. We were visiting with a gentleman in my neighborhood he's moving into a retirement settlement, a retirement community in the Dallas area. And his daughter said, would you send up a good word from my dad to the universe? And I said, well, I'll pray to Jesus for it, type thing. So we have all these changes that are happening. Spiritual openness, though, is very, very high. 70% of the adults in the U.S. say they believe in God or in a higher power. They believe God really exists. They want to grow spiritually. They're more open to Him today than they were before the pandemic. At the same time, though, they don't think the church is the answer. It's a very complicated kind of view that they have. And in part, because of the politics of the church, they got really taken to the top under the last administration and somewhat into this administration. And so people are just unsure the church is the answer to their spiritual issues. If you ask them what the church should do, they say it should be involved in the local community. It should be doing good for people who are in need. And so we created this whole process, something we've been doing since 2015. And when the pandemic hit, we realized all of a sudden churches didn't want to do anything new. They were just trying to survive. They were trying to figure out how to come back. And so we took our entrepreneurial heart of our process and we've wrapped it now with a number of pieces that help churches use entrepreneurship in ways that create growth and don't blow up the org. Because a lot of times entrepreneurial things can cause a lot of chaos. And so we want to do it in such a way that creates growth and impact in communities for the sake of the gospel. And the picture that we hope to see in churches that we work to create is a church that moves very powerfully outside of its walls, and as it does so, it's encountering brand new groups of people. It's predominantly doing so in ministries of compassion. Now, y'all have already got a lot of that kind of percolating and happening. But we do this by saying, how can we take existing ministries that already are happening and make sure they are very compassion-driven and very expressive of the gospel and who is Jesus? But we also then start looking right away for new leaders who have an entrepreneurial bent, because we know roughly 12 to 14% of the U.S. population are entrepreneurs, and that goes from teens all the way through 100 teens. At the same time, those individuals usually don't like to serve on a committee or board. They get bored. They want to see stuff happen, and they like to kind of run the show in many ways. And so we want to start calling them out and invite them into the game, because they're wired to create growth, and a lot of times they just know how to do it. But if you ask them how they did it, they couldn't tell you. They're just designed that way. It's kind of their Psalm 121 design. And we know that when congregations do this effectively, what ends up happening is that they're reaching groups of people, and some of these people will only go as far back as this ministry. Some of them will not go all the way back into the church. Many of the ministries that we're working with are really these kind of ministries right now, that they're like first step ministries into a relationship with Jesus. And so some of these people will come all the way back in. Some of them will only be impacted here. And we want to make sure these ministries are rich in gospel and understanding and how to share Jesus well. And what happens when you do this, then, churches start measuring different things. They start realizing that all those people that they're impacting are very critical in the life of a church in a post-Christian culture, which is where we are today. So when we work with churches, we see them a lot of times go from lots of ideas of how to do things to united and growing with momentum, and everybody's on the same page. They're all different colored arrows, and they're all still their own people, but we get everybody aligned, and we're all moving toward growth in one process. Let me lay out for you a timeline of what we do and all the elements. So let me just stop here. I'll stop here for a second. What questions or concerns or comments do you have about anything that I've said so far? What I'm going to do next is kind of show you the timeline and the pieces that you as a ministry will be going through. But let me stop. What questions or comments, concerns do you have about anything that I've said so far? So the question is, how do you get from being hearers of the word to doers of the word? Individual members of the church. So what and I don't know totally your culture here. I know Jeremy, and I suspect the culture is somewhat there already. We want to make sure that there's a permission giving to use your gifts. We also want to make sure, though, there's a process that if you want to do something, you're supported and you're equipped, because a lot of times, I know when people would come and say, Pastor, I got this idea or whatever, first of all, usually when they tell you that, they want the pastor to do it. Okay, Pastor, I got an idea of what we ought to do here, meaning you. Our response was always at Crosspoint, our response was, that's fantastic, find 2 or 3 more people, get a team, convince them you should do it, come back and we'll equip you, we'll walk with you to do it. So on one hand, you're looking for people, you're encouraging people to move in their giftedness. You're also, though, making sure that there's some kind of a process going with them that supports them and encourages them, and they don't feel like they're just left out to dry, okay? So that's very important. And when I show you the pieces we have elements of that to make sure that people feel supported. But they're also called in and invited in. One of the first things we'll do is give people permission. I haven't talked about this yet, but we give people permission to say, you know what, I've been doing this out of obligation because it just, somebody had to do it. I'd rather do something out of passion. And when we start to give that permission, we see seats change on the bus in a wonderful way. We also see congregations stop doing things that are no longer effective. And that's hard for us when we have history. Yuba City, so this is a great example. We're live streaming right now. First Lutheran Yuba City, this church I told you about, they live stream every morning. And they've got somebody sitting up in the balcony, and they have not great technology, and almost every week the pastor has somebody tell them it's not working or something needs to be fixed or whatever it is. And I said, could you just tell me how many people are watching your live stream? It's about 5. And I said, so why are you live streaming? Okay? And maybe that's not what you should be doing right now, because there are other things that we could be doing. And so that's just one example. But in that situation, I'm not sure that it is worth them doing it at this stage of their ministry. And that's what we'd want to do.
What other questions or comments about anything I said so far? Okay, let me keep going along here then. So let me tell you that there are 3 phases. The first one is we work on clarifying your calling. We really want to understand historically who you are today and how you got here and what is the calling that Jesus has for you as a congregation that's a unique calling in this particular community. Then we work on how to equip that calling, and this is where we bring in some entrepreneurial principles and what it means then to start fresh, to start brand new in certain areas of your ministry. And then we look at activating that calling. This is one of the things we do a little differently, that we're going to walk alongside of you for 15 months in this last phase. So we're not here to simply help you come up with a plan. We're here to help you execute and implement that plan. It's why we call it a growth process, not just a planning process. Everything in the line above is where the congregation especially participates. Everything below the line is where groups of leaders or the leadership will be participating. And by the way, we define leader like anybody who thinks he or she is a leader, or anybody who has an influence or an investment in the congregation. We really want you to be a part of that process. Phase 1 is about 3 months. We're in it right now, January through March. Phase 2 is about 3 months, April through July. And then, like I said before, we'll be with you for about 18 months after that. The first thing that we do is we have a series of orientation meetings. These are usually virtual. I happen to be flying from Yuba City back to Austin today, so I made a long layover, nothing like a 12-hour layover in Denver, and said, okay, I'll come and we'll do kind of an orientation meeting here as well. So we'll do a series of those so that everybody pretty well understands what's going on as best as they can before we start it. We then help you choose a steering team. Pastor Jason mentioned, or Jeremy mentioned the steering team. And that steering team is tasked with doing the heavy decision lifting
It's not that they're going to do a lot of action. There are a couple of events they're going to be involved in, but they're going to be doing a lot of praying and a lot of seeking, understanding, and where are we going as a ministry. We then have a 6-hour Clarifier Calling workshop, and I would anticipate that all of you here would be a part of this event. It will be on a Saturday from 9 to 3, and the goal of this event is for us to hear from you. Really, the goal is to hear from God through you of what you love about this ministry. That's the most important question you'll answer. The second most important question is, where do you believe Jesus wants this ministry to be 5 years from now? So you can start praying about those two questions already. We want to know what you love about Summit of Peace and where you believe Jesus wants it to be 5 years from now. So we ask the leaders those questions, and we spend the day. We also take you through, to the gentleman's question earlier, we take you through about a 2-hour exercise of you saying, what are the gifts God has given you and what's your passion that he's put on your heart? Who does he especially want you to be loving on and serving? And that begins to kind of start this whole understanding of what other ministries maybe you could be involved in, or even we could help you launch here in the ministry. We then do a survey of the whole congregation. So then the very next day on a Sunday, we will run a very, very simple 3-question survey that everybody can answer as much as they want to answer. And it's the same questions. What do you love about this place? What's missing here? And where do you see this ministry being 5 years from now? That will all get captured by us, and our staff then takes it, and we look at it, and we distill it down, and we present it back to the steering team that what we think the answers are in an objective way to what your people have said. We're trying to create this vision, this ministry movement that's coming from the people. It's not just coming from a top-down process. And then you will give a report. So at every phase, we want to close the loop with the congregation so that the people who call this place home know what's going on and they're moving forward as well. In phase 2, we start this process of finding entrepreneurial leaders. We have a whole process that we do with that. You'll have a series of meetings inviting people to come and hear more. And in a congregation that you're worshiping, I think your average was about 160, you said something like that. I would anticipate that we would find somewhere from maybe 5, maybe maximum 10 new teams that would come out of your congregation. When I worshiped with you this morning, you're an older bent here in this group, but there was a lot of young faces here as well. So I would anticipate we would have at least somewhere between 5 and 10 new ministries. We'd start looking for those people early on. We then have a 2-day workshop, and it's for the steering team only, and it answers the very important question, who for the sake of the future does Summit need to be focusing on reaching? Who for the sake of the future does Summit need to be reaching? And we want to help you really narrow that down very tightly, and then we start looking at all the ministries and designing things around that. We come back then for a 1.5-day strategic leadership workshop, where many, if not all of you, would be back in the room for that. And we take you through a whole process where the steering team is presenting its decisions for input to you, and we get feedback, and then we build out action plan on that. The church leadership approves that plan, and then Pastor Jeremy will roll out to the whole congregation a sermon series on this, and this will be probably somewhere around the beginning of August that sermon series will be coming out that will explain here's where we're going as a ministry. But then in August, we have the final on-site event. It's another 2-day workshop, and now it's for the existing ministry teams and the new ministry teams that are especially impacted by this decision. And we're back to the races then. And then we do monthly coaching that follows up for all of those teams in a virtual setting for 15 months. So let me stop there. That's the timeline. This is what we'll be doing with you over the next season. Yes, sir. Jeremy, do you want to announce that steering team again, I guess, just for everybody?
Yes, it's Jackie Jackson. She is representing the board and happens to be its chair. It's Chris Munson, Laura Niederuck, myself, and Sarah. So, Bill's process, unless you're going to say more about it, is he's kind of specific by the size of your church on how big he wants to see that, and so that's kind of.
Yeah, what we have found in doing this in some form or fashion for 8 years is that a team, an ideal team, is about 5, maybe 7. Otherwise, they can't make decisions. They struggle at making the decisions. What is very important is that the team is chosen and affirmed by the leadership, and they're respected. And we also want the team to be diverse. We want about half women, half men, and if possible, we want to see age diversity in the team. And as I met some of the people on the team, you have that, okay? So what other questions or comments do you have about anything we're going to be doing and or your role in that, your participation in that?
What's all this cost?
This process costs about I don't remember about $40,000 for the 2 years.
It's in this year's budget. No, it's in this year's budget, yeah. I mean, that's where. So our budget for this year is almost the same as last year. So the big chunk of it's coming from not having to pay Lexi this year. That's where the lion's share of it's coming. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. I know I'll be seeing a number of you over the next years.
Okay. All right, so thank you, Bill. Thanks for being here. Thanks for presenting that. It worked out just perfectly. He was coming through because I figured straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Straight from the Texan's mouth, maybe? I don't know. But thank you so much. So we're excited about it. Bill's had a lot of success with this in his ministry. Lord's blessed it. So we're excited and believe that's what God, be beneficial for discovering what God wants us to do. So usually, the second half of my Summit of Summit is to tell you what we're doing the next year. And this year, I'm telling you what we're doing over the next year is figuring out what we're going to do in the coming years. If that makes sense. So, any other questions about anything? Awesome. Okay. Well, let's close with prayer. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, we thank you for our time together. Thank you for your blessings upon us, chief among them the gift of your Son. We pray that by your Spirit you'd lead us in our places of work, leisure, and learning to be sharing your the gospel, the love of Christ wherever it is that we go. Even in this changing world that can be oftentimes scary and confusing, we know, Lord, that you have a plan, and we're eager for you to unveil that with us. Pray that you would bless 5-2 and their time with us as well, that would be fruitful. We look forward to seeing what you have in store for us as your people. Be with Bill, protect him in his traveling home as well. We ask this all in the name of your Son. Amen. All right. Thank you.